Welcome, guys. I'm excited to introduce you to Jacquelyn Aluotto. She's an amazing advocate, and she's doing incredible work specifically in the Harris County, Texas area to combat human trafficking and raise awareness about it and make change in legislation and policy. So, Jacquelyn, welcome and thank you so much for everything you're doing and for being here tonight.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. There's a lot going on in the world of combating human trafficking, and there's a lot that people need to know. There's a lot that we're constantly ringing the alarm bells about, not only when it comes to protecting children, but also holding elected officials accountable and making sure that online platforms are also accountable for their content and what type of exposure children have to what's on their platforms. So before we even dive into this discussion, which is going to be quite intriguing, can you tell people a little bit about what you do and what people need to know about your work?
Sure. So I'm blessed to be a part of an incredible organization called the No Trafficking Zone. No Trafficking Zone was really created because in Harris County and other places, there's was all these human trafficking organizations and laws that were changed, but yet human trafficking itself was rising. So we wanted to do things a little differently. We weren't going to be a check the box organization. We were going to be a create the box organization. And what I mean by that is we're on the front lines. We're constantly working with child sex trafficking victims, their families who have lost their children to sex trafficking, and we took sex trafficking and we broke it down into markets because human trafficking is a business. It's a horrendous business and it's an illicit crime, but it generates over $245 billion, brings in more than all of the NFL football teams. And so we wanted to take that business and break it down into markets. And then into those markets, we created what we call no trafficking zones. And so I'll give you an example. With schools, we saw in the state of Texas that 55% of survivor leaders had done a study and also done it with Thorn in Texas, saying that they were first trafficked, groomed, and lured connected to their school campus, whether they were on their school campus, at a party, at a bus stop, or their friends had introduced them to someone online, whether it was a chat room, a friend on Instagram, whatever it was, the connection was with the school. And so that for us was very alarming. And then we started doing data, and it was 3 decades. And so basically, we wanted to change laws. We wanted to deter child sex trafficking happening because we realized that school zones were really, a predator and a human trafficker's playground. It was something that kids are easily accessible in schools, sadly. And so we wanted to create laws where in Texas it would be 25 to 99 years, first degree felony, and where if you try to recruit the kids via a cell phone, any internet device, that you'd be breaking that zone while they were at school or while they were at a school function or a sponsored school function. And so that just gives an example of what a zone is and what we do on the policy side. And then on the advocacy and prevention and intervention side, within those laws were education. You had to educate the kids at schools. The kids that were taking driver's ed, they had to be educated on it. Signs had to be up in schools in English and in Spanish that if they were trafficked, these were numbers that they could call, but also the penalty of the crime. And then working with the schools themselves to really start coming up with good plans and implementing if trafficking happens. And so it's extensive, but we find it to be really working. So we're excited.
Yeah, that's so necessary because if we can prevent children from having to experience the horrors of exploitation or trafficking or other forms of bad things, there's so much to be said for preventing them from having to not only be traumatized, but then having to heal from that trauma. So, a big part of our message is protecting innocence. And I have a good friend named Mark Strauss. He's a technologist, and he sees what's in the world of this digital world that kids are completely inundated with. And that's so aggressive and it can be so predatory. But it's also, we have to understand that children cannot unsee bad things that they're exposed to, whether it be adult content or inappropriate content or things that are violent, etc. There's no price. The price of innocence is priceless, to say it that way. So what we want to do is not only empower them with the truth and make sure they know the risks and the signs, but also empower them with what to do if and when they are confronted by something inappropriate or predatory. So it's a big way that people like Jacquelyn and we are fighting back to counteract the influence that our children are so subjected to.
Yeah.
So thank you again for the work you're doing. That's so desperately needed. Now, there's been a lot of advancements these days in the world of people who have been advocating against adult content. And guys, we're going to keep our words pretty soft for the sake of this platform and just for the sake of keeping it soft. But what we're going to be talking about is somewhat of a touchy subject for some when it comes to adult entertainment and adult content and how that impacts our society at large. So even adult mindsets and relationships and standards, but specifically these days, how it's impacting children. And there's been some interesting advancements in policies and different state laws, specifically in Texas. So Jacquelyn, can you give us an overview of what you know from your research about this adult content site?
So what Texas did, which was really amazing this past legislative session, and before I get into that, I want to thank everything that you're doing. There's so many incredible people on the front lines who are doing so many wonderful things. And I appreciate every single one of them because it's just so necessary. And hopefully this army is going to keep on building and getting bigger. We've witnessed this past legislative session some really remarkable things. Like we have the past couple in Texas, but one was that our Attorney General Ken Paxton was working on a bill for age verification, which is something that we know is extremely important. And it's extremely important because the average, child in America that is being subjected and indoctrinated into pornography is 8 years old. And we know that, an 8-year-old should go ahead.
So I just want to highlight what you said. That's the average age, meaning that's the medium. There are kids so much younger than that. 8 is the average age these days. I just want everyone to let that sink in because that's not okay. Please continue.
No, it's so scary because, our society has progressed at such a ridiculous level. And you even can see it how the way children dress now. Children dress like adults versus 10 years ago when I was, well, no, it would have to be like 30 years ago. But even when you see what we've come on in 10 years, how different and how quickly we are evolving, how much even, in all honesty, social media and reality TV and pop culture has drastically changed our nation and the way our society and culture has changed. We have been indoctrinated into really the exploitation of women and children. And it's really scary, and you can really see it. Even if you look at TV shows from 20 years ago to now, it's really night and day from a family structure to how kids and parents communicate to what kids are allowed to see. So the difference is if you were a boy and say you were 12 and you wanted to look at quote unquote pornography or something bad, you'd have to go to like the convenience store and try to look at a Playboy or a dirty magazine and not get caught. It was a lot harder to look at content, whereas versus now, our algorithms actually target youth. And so I'll give you something so simple because parents would say, oh, my child would never watch that. But, children are being targeted and preyed on. And so we shouldn't blame them. When you have a kid now in school, they have to work on the internet ever since the COVID era. Well, those algorithms, that child material that kids are learning are really being targeted for pornography violent violent trailers. And so you'll be sitting, when I sit with my daughter and we're doing work, a crazy trailer will come up, and there's murder, and there's violence. And there is a way in this day and age and the internet to control algorithms. You do know who's viewing for the most part. Um, Child games, what they're playing, how they talk. And so when children get online, and I guess maybe it's 8 years old, and it's going to continue to get younger, because as we gradually, you know, get more into this digital age, more younger kids, you see kids that are 1 and 2 years old, watching, YouTube and on their iPads. But for whatever reason, right now, the average age is 8 years old. And what happens is your brains are developing until you're 25. And for a little boy, what they're seeing is, oh, this is how I'm supposed to treat um, a girl. And pornography is a lot more violent these days. And for a little girl, what she's seeing is this is how men are supposed to treat me. And they are both seeing that this is what love is supposed to be and what sex. And then what else happens is then you get addicted to pornography, and it becomes an addiction. And your actually chemicals in your brain are changing, and it's hurting and affecting children. And so the age verification for Pornhub was so important, because it is protecting children on such a significant level, and it's really talking about that prevention and intervention.
So are those, because I agree with you that, okay, this is my personal perspective, right? There's a huge difference in terms of what's appropriate for adults versus children. Now, me personally,
Yes.
like, not my thing, not into it, not defending it. I'm just saying, I don't have a problem with what consensual adults do. I don't care, don't need to know. But there's a huge difference with what's appropriate for children. Now, as you said, the internet can be rather aggressive. And no, we're not exaggerating. Yes, I've seen how aggressive the internet can be. I've been a junior decoy in counter trafficking operations, posing as a child on the internet, not on dark web apps, not even on dating apps, just on networking apps that any kid can download from the App Store and create a profile with a baby looking child's face. And I was inundated with predators saying the most ridiculously creepy things, like, the, hey baby, you're so cute, do you have a boyfriend, to the, what would you do for $500, all the way up to the most aggressively violent things you can't imagine. As for it would be inappropriate for consensual adults to say some of these things that these predators said in their first message to a child. So we just need to understand that, number one, children use the internet these days to be delighted and informed and entertained, and that's their playground these days. And point two, the internet in general can be rampant with predators. Now, those are predatory,
Yes.
terrible adults. That's not your child's fault. Your child may not be soliciting any form of attention. I know I wasn't when I was pretending to be a child. I didn't even send message requests or comments or anything. I had a picture of a child, and I was just flooded with predation. So we need you to understand, yes, your child is probably the angel you think they are. Let's go with that. Okay. Predators are targeting them, and it's an unfair playing field.
Yes.
Because children are innocent and young.
Yeah, 100%. So, just a simple analogy that I like to use is, would you let an 8-year-old go to a store and buy alcohol? People would say, oh my God, no. An 8-year-old can't be drinking alcohol. Alcohol is a drug. Why would you let an 8-year-old consume content and violent content that's going to actually change the chemicals in their brain, and expose them and exploit them on so many different levels? We seem to be living in this era where we think that children should be making huge decisions, and children are children, and adults have to make those decisions. And it's a predator's job to prey. So if I'm on the internet and I'm a predator, it's my job to prey. It's my job to manipulate a very unsuspecting child who, by the way, has now grown up in an era where talking over a screen to someone they don't know is very normal. First base, second base, third base, first. fourth, fourth base sometimes happens over a screen because this is what they have grown up in. And predators know that. And a lot of times parents don't, because a predator's job is to stay up with the times and these technological advances that keep on happening. And so it's really important for parents to understand that predators with technology have a major advantage. And it's hard for adults to know when they're being manipulated by abusers. Imagine an 8-year-old, a 10-year-old, a 12-year-old, a teenager. Um, Someone so sophisticated and sinister that knows the intentions of what they want to do with your child to manipulate them. And so you don't leave your door open. I think there's 8 billion people on the planet now. The majority of them have phones. Why would you give them access to your child?
Absolutely. That analogy is a good one. I also have heard of one that was pretty shocking to me, but it's true because I'm a huge advocate for child safety, obviously, and internet safety specifically. Someone said something about giving a child unlimited, unsupervised access to the internet is like giving them a loaded weapon and just saying, here you go, good luck, handle it. Because here's the thing, parents, I don't think anyone, let me just hope and pray that no one is intentionally allowing an 8-year-old, for example, to see pornography. Let's assume that's not who we're talking to. However, we need you to understand that children are curious, so they will pursue that curiosity. And they are, in many cases, being targeted by that content to pique their curiosity. So once again, your child is innocent. Yes, they are. They are a child. However, the algorithms and the technology platforms are often soliciting them with predatory content. So this is one of many examples of that, but there's a very large adult content site, one of the biggest that owns a lot of different adult sites. And recently, Texas did something to change the way that Texans interact with that adult content. Do you know how to explain that and all the details of it?
So that is so Pornhub falls under this group of mind geek and these groups of probably all of the largest websites that house pornography digitally. It's really quite an expansive portfolio. And basically, if you know anything about Pornhub just doesn't care if children watch it, but through Pornhub, they have distributed rape on their content, CSAM, child sexual abuse material. So for regular people that don't know what that means, child pornography, children getting raped, trafficking through their website. And it's really hard to get accountability because of laws. Our laws have not caught up to this digital age. And so what Texas did and what our attorney general has really been fighting for is they wanted to make an age verification law. And the age verification, what's great about that is it now makes it so much harder if you're a child to go on and watch these like an easy site like Pornhub. What happened is Pornhub got so upset about this law that they had decided they were gonna take it down in Texas because they didn't want to have the repercussions of getting penalized. And then to follow is now Florida and some other states, which is very exciting because it's like with the no trafficking school zone bill. You know, all you need is one state to be the leader on it, and then for other states to see how you can do it. The reason why this is such a big win is because big tech really controls the market and really funds a lot of elected official seats and campaigns and drives a lot of laws into both political parties. And so traditionally, when we've been before Congress and fighting, it's been really hard to take on big tech because they have so much power, because they have so much money. But this is a huge win in the human trafficking movement, really just the decency movement of if you want to protect children, that now you see all these other laws seeing, wow, we can do this. Texas did this, and we're going to do this. So hopefully you're going to see a chain reaction of Pornhub and their other websites under them that kind of facilitate the same kind of stuff. Um, you're going to see them being closed down or
Very
wanting to
interesting.
leave those states. Yeah, or wanting to leave those states because it's also kind of telling. Um, if you don't have nefarious thoughts and you're not being sinister, you would say, fine, Texas, no problem. We're totally for the age verification. We don't want children watching this content. We understand this isn't for children. We understand that if children watch this, we're helping to abuse them and exploit them. But instead, uh, Pornhub's reaction is we're going to take down our website, and it was a very hostile one. So it also shows their intent is not really of the well-being of children, in my personal opinion.
Yeah, that's an interesting dynamic. I want to unpack that with you, mostly just because I'm a very solutions oriented person. And, this is like not my field, not my interest, but I tend to think of it this way. So, in general, let's just call it adult content, pornography, whatever, adult entertainment. That stuff in various forms has been around forever. And to be honest, if we're being real, it's not going away. So when you take a big player like Pornhub and other affiliates or whatever the biggest players are, if you were to scrutinize them and force them to be off the market, I would think it would actually open the void for either people who want to consume that content to go into the dark web or black market and do so without or with less regulation, and or would other competitors come back up. So I have like a broader, I'm just interested in your opinion, broader perspective on what's the long-term goal here in terms of those combating this industry. And then the other aspect is, how can we implement effective age verification? Because from what I've seen, Texas implemented this age verification requirement, and Pornhub posted an article saying that the way that Texas legislators tried to do that put the user's identity at risk, because basically they have to upload a identification, like a picture of their photo ID, and that could create a substantial risk for identity theft. So because this is not my field, I'm not sure if that's, a feeble excuse or if there really are gaps that can be closed. But in terms of it being effective, could people use a VPN to get around it? Could a child use a VPN to get around it? Like, how solid do you think that solution is? I know that's a multifaceted question.
Sure, I'm going to try that. I'm going to try to answer that the best I can, because I'm not a tech, that's not what I specialize in. But what I would say is this: accountability breeds responsibility. And if I have a tech platform where I am distributing not just sex and pornography, but on my site, goes for all social media sites. Rape, CSAM, things that are felonies. It is actually a felony to distribute child pornography, also known as CSAM. It's also a crime to make it. And then it's a crime for what you're doing in it. So it's kind of like a crime scene video that you're watching. And if you wouldn't be allowed to do that in person in real life, you shouldn't be allowed to do that on the internet. What's happened is we need 230 provisions. And what it is there's a law, it was called the Decency Act, and to protect the First Amendment rights. Now, we all have First Amendment rights that need to be protected. And I'm sure, like what you just said, there are some things for identity that should be protected. However, when you have a membership to Pornhub, you have to put in your credit card information. You're purchasing certain things a certain way, whether it's video content, whether it's membership. You still have to put in your information. So I don't really think that's the reason why, but let's just say that is. Then there are provisions that you could put in to make sure that people's identity are protected just like every other big group does, like Walmart, when you put in your information to shop. These companies were created for that. The reason why I truly believe that there is a backlog is because a backlash, and I could be wrong, but I really don't think I am, is because of the money that they are losing. The money that they're losing when you put in an age verification, the targeting of children, because really the money you're spending to fight this, you could be using that money to implement a system and a solution that they're saying needs to be put in place, which is what they don't want it to have, such as someone's identity getting leaked. Why don't you
Right.
take that and develop it so that we can protect children? And then if adults want to watch pornography, then adults can go and watch pornography.
Right. I mean, again, I see the huge need to keep these conversations separate, even though they are related. There's adult entertainment, and we're talking about consensual adults. I'm not making the case that that's, should be healthy, or I'm just saying there's what
Sure.
adults choose to do with their life and personal life. Separately, there's the abuse and exploitation of children. None of this is ever justified. Like that's just a not okay from any of us thing. So
Right.
my question is more along the lines of specific to the exploitation of children.
What happened? You froze. Can you hear me? Hold on. You froze. Can you see me? Hold on. Hey, can you lower your TV? Thanks. I don't know if you can see me.
Sorry about
Oh,
that. Having
okay,
some
there you are.
internet issues. Let's see if I can
Okay.
remove this. All right, we're back. Bad weather.
Okay.
Okay, sorry. I'm not sure where it cut off, but what we were saying is that I see the need to separate adult entertainment, sexuality, etc., from child exploitation, because those are two. There's relation in these conversations, but in my mind, they're completely separate in terms of the adult industry. I'm just going to put that to the side right now. Not my battle, not my field. My field is protecting children. So I've heard accusations, for example, that Pornhub currently has child abuse content on there. But I've also researched and seen that it's now under new management and they've done a lot to clean it up, etc. So the claim have child abuse content on there. Have you verified or have you seen evidence that they do currently or have recently had child exploitive content?
I mean, I haven't checked in, months, but there are plenty of cases of children against Pornhub that have called them. I think, you know, so young as publicly like 11 years old, 12-year olds that they've called, their parents have called, please take this down. My child was raped. Now, um, do I know if, it's been under new management and they've cleaned it up and there's nothing on there? Could I say yes or no? Definitely no. Um, is it a possibility that they have? Yes. But again, that's what happens when you don't have laws implemented. See, laws are very important. Laws and systems and structures and protocols are very important because it protects the innocent. And it should always be that there is mechanisms put in place that there can never be content of CSAM up. Um, ever on any internet, not just Pornhub, any social media platform, anything, and that if there is, though those platforms and the people behind it will be held responsible. Now, in this day and age, can you guarantee that for everything? No. But implement systems to protect children. Not
For
even
sure.
just children, the women who have been raped and trafficked, and their content has been on Pornhub and other sites, where then they're re-traumatized. I couldn't imagine getting raped and trafficked and then having to watch it, having all of my loved ones have to watch it, and then knowing that the platform who's redistributing it can legally distribute it and profit off of it. And not just them profit off of it, but the credit cards being used to buy that content, and, and so on. The issue is that laws like this need to be put in place because you need checks and balances. Accountability does breed responsibility, which is why
Absolutely.
Pornhub said we're going to pull out of Texas, because if they had this ironclad system, or any, why wouldn't you stay in Texas? Why wouldn't you stay? Or why wouldn't you say to the Attorney General, hey, we really want to work with you. Here are our fears. Let's work that out. And so those are just the questions that I have. Obviously, I don't talk to this of MindGeek and who's over all that and with Pornhub, so I don't know what their thoughts are. But
Right.
I
I've
just know that none of these platforms are putting in real sustainable solutions to protect people.
Right. Now, that's a multifaceted problem because I agree with you that in general, tech platforms in general, our government is not doing its job when it comes to protecting children. In general, for sure, I agree with you. Now, I'm also applying that across all platforms, including the one we're on right now, including all the safe social media platforms we all use. I've, in my advocacy, in my work, in my investigations, I have found child harm content on these platforms that are not adult content platforms, right? Now, I'll be honest, I don't use adult content platforms. I'm not, I wouldn't know if there is child harm content on a platform like Pornhub, but I have researched that they are basically claiming that it's all been removed. Now, I do know that there are previous lawsuits and things that can go on for, many years that were basically, they started a few years ago. I would like to find out if they currently have child harm content, because to your point about laws exist. That's already illegal in every country, Canada, United States, that is already illegal. So our problem is not that it's not legal. Sorry, our problem is not that it's illegal. Our problem is not that it's not illegal. Our problem is that it's not being enforced. That big tech companies like the one everyone's watching this on, whoever that is, they are not being held accountable and laws are not being enforced. So I'm trying to come at this problems with a solution-oriented mindset of, first of all, adult content is not going to go away. While there's a lot of bad things can happen there, I am going to separate the conversation because, yes, of course, it's never justifiable, etc., to exploit any human being, no matter their age. However, there is a lot of slippery slope in the sex worker industry with adults who initially consent and then maybe something. There's a lot of slippery slope there. So I know, in many cases it's a choice. In many cases, a lot of bad things happen. My fight is to protect children. So solely focusing on children being harmed on these platforms. My goal, like I said, is to make these platforms free of child exploitation. That is an achievable goal. That is actually something realistic that hopefully everyone can unite around. Now, I've had conversations with people that were obviously sensitive about me calling out adult content and basically a little bit, you could say, triggered or not wanting to give up their vice. But when I explain the difference between adult content, as long as you're not hurting anybody, I don't, that's not my thing. I don't care. I'm talking about children being harmed. I'm like, oh, yeah. I hope all of us can agree that this is the no-go zone. So that being said, a solutions-oriented approach could be, could we work with some of these big players who are claiming to protect children? Could we get in there and hold them accountable? Could we investigate and make sure that what they're claiming is true? That would mean, you know, digging into their practices and the user base and the content and all of that. But could we also work together to get bad guys? Because here's what I'm saying. According to Pornhub, they're claiming that there's a lot of different information collected on someone in order to upload content. So if a bad person is found to be doing a bad thing with child exploitation content, and they have that data, could nonprofits, the good ones, could we collect that data and do something to get the bad guys? So here's sort of a hypothetical question, because you know a little bit about, you know, my, let's call it dark humor, or my approach to being realistic about the corruption and the current state, and what can to make something work and make things safer for children with the existing policies and people that we have. So maybe this hypothetically or not, but if a company like Pornhub were to commit to, you know, funding and helping efforts to combat child trafficking and exploitation, and if they were to work with viable nonprofits to give that data of the bad guys in order for that to be taken care of the right way, do you think that would, in general, be a step towards progress? And would you be willing to work with them if they were willing to do something like that?
Well, yeah. I mean, I'm going to be willing to work with anyone who's going to help protect children. And to your point, you know, Nkosi put out how Snapchat has really been doing some good things. And some of these steps were improving detection and moderation for sexually explicit and exploitative content, defaulting content controls for new minor age accounts joining, increasing parent visibility into their child's activity through Family Center, creating dedicated resources on sexual abuse and exploitation. And so this is really important because in the past, they've been a part of this dirty dozen list. And they understood what was happening. I actually don't think that, you know, none of us knew what the internet was going to be. And it just keeps on evolving. I'm kind of afraid to see what it's going to be even in 5 years from now. And I'm sure that a lot of these platforms didn't either, so they weren't prepared. And so some have just decided they're not going to do anything because they don't have to, and then others are really taking steps. So yes, like Snapchat did that. That's great because Snapchat was really, a lot of kids were being exploited on Snapchat. But also Google has also decided to really step in and do certain things. So to what you're saying, yes, it would be amazing to work with these tech companies, to see like what are the trends, what are the algorithms, on Facebook. Well, now Meta, you know, there are pedophile groups and there are apps and they target children. How do they work? How are they created? All of those systems, so that you know if this is how they work, then you can understand how to dismantle them. And that's important. A big part of the trafficking zone is we want to disrupt and dismantle human trafficking and commercial sexual exploitation. And so everything that you're saying would do that. And that would be great. I don't know, you know, who would do that and who wouldn't, but I have a lot more hope than I had 5 years ago, or even 2 years ago when I testified before Congress, because we were talking about the Earn It Act. And, you know, now talking about it just 2 years later, you see Snapchat and Google and other companies, these social media platforms, they are implementing measures saying, okay, we didn't understand the severity, or we understand we're going to be held accountable. So let's take these steps. And it's making a big difference. So I do think that there's definitely hope. I just hope that we can get there, because it's just devastating for kids. And so I want us to get there as fast as we possibly can, so that, you know, children and parents don't suffer.
Exactly. There's a lot of steps needed to get there. Now, I've researched this case, and I know you can only tell so much by what's been said publicly, but one of the, I guess, arguments that Pornhub has been making about age verification.
What happened? You froze.
I think
You're
I was
freeze.
looking
Okay,
into.
I hear you
Okay,
now. Okay,
okay,
you're moving.
bad
Okay,
way.
yeah. Oh no, you froze.
If the age verification is required on the device level, that means not the individual app, but on the device level. Have you heard of that?
No, I'm sorry. You broke up. Can you
Oh,
say that
sorry.
again?
I was saying one of the things I've heard of in terms of solutions that Pornhub has been pushing for is device-based age verification. So instead of the individual apps having age verification requirements, the actual device, cell phone, iPad, etc., is programmed for a certain age range. I've talked to different technologists about this, and it actually seems viable. I'm just wondering if you've heard of that solution and if you think it's viable.
Well, what happens if you just borrow the phone of an adult?
Right. I
I'm
mean, a kid can borrow another phone at school. Like a lot of these solutions, and this is me talking to different technologists, all these solutions have, you could say, loopholes, or you can build a fence at the top of the cliff, but how many layers of falling will that protect you from? What I'm heading towards is, again, a solutions oriented approach,
solution.
because I'm not advocating for the adult entertainment industry. I just know it's not going anywhere. And that's going to be a
Right,
big
right,
battle to try to bring, versus separating the child exploitation aspect of
right.
it and saying this is not okay in any shape or
Um,
form.
I think, in all honesty, that the harsher the laws to make it harder for children to access these websites, the better it is. And if Pornhub is worried about protecting them with their identity, well, then they should come up with software then that if someone does need their identity protected, then to invest their money into that, because they're certainly making a lot of money, billions of dollars. Um, because the impetus really has to be on children and the safety of children and how many children have been harmed because they are viewing things that um, are damaging them for the rest of their lives. So I don't feel bad for these tech companies that generate hundreds of billions of dollars because they will have to put in more time, money, and resources to make sure that people are protected. That's what they decided to do, to have a platform. And that's their responsibility. What I'm excited about is that we finally have elected officials who are saying enough is enough. Our kids are getting beyond damage. There's too much access to predators. There's too much access to traffickers. There's too much access to rings. There's too much access to kids watching content that they should not ever have access to or be exposed to. And that elected officials are finally saying, no, this is so wrong. It's gone way too far. And we're going to start implementing laws and solutions to protect our children because we cannot rely on companies to do so. And
Right.
I find that to be exciting. And I find that to be exciting where you can say to these platforms, no, these are our laws, and make the systems around the laws to protect kids, or your platforms aren't going to be in our states or be in our nation. And I know that for people that sounds harsh, but um, if you're protecting children, it sounds great to me.
I agree. Excuse me. So, excuse me.
You want to get
I
some water?
So I agree with that, but can we trust our elected officials with the laws?
Oh man. Um, it's a lot of work. Uh, I mean, so the catch 22 is there's plenty of laws in place, right? But you have to mandate them. And so if you don't mandate them, then it doesn't matter if you have laws, if you don't enforce them. Um, I think what really happened in Texas, which is truly a miracle, I think it is a miracle from God, is a law passed that people never thought was going to pass. And then they tried to appeal the law, and Texas won. And when Texas won, instead of the company saying, okay, we're going to work with these modifications because these are the laws for this state, and this state is really serious about protecting kids when it comes to this. And instead, Pornhub said, we're going to take down the site in Texas. For me, that's a huge win because that shows that whether elected officials or people are going to enforce the law or not, now that's not going to be in Texas. And what it also did is it trickled down where other states followed suit and did the same thing. And I think what you're seeing is it's not even just the elected officials. It's that parents have had enough. Parents are saying, you can't come for our kids. Our kids go on the internet because our government told us, hey, go on the internet. It's safe. It's great. You have to do schooling. And so we expect and we demand systems to be put in place so that when our children are on the internet learning or watching funny videos or watching TV, because that's what kids do now, they're not going to be exposed again to content that they should never be exposed to. I personally love that because you're right. You're never gonna change certain sex industries with consenting adults. But when it comes to kids, as parents, we absolutely, it is our right, it is our job to protect our children. And if we know that kids watching content that they shouldn't watch is going to harm them, it's our responsibility to make sure that we are holding our elected officials accountable themselves to enforce those laws. And I think what you're seeing is there's this uprising, from parents in schools to kids reading stuff in books. An 8-year-old should not be reading about intercourse. That's absurd. And anyone that thinks that it's normal, I'm sorry, there's something mentally wrong with them. 8-year-olds should not be thinking about having sex. 8-year-olds should be thinking about, having fun. Most 8-year-olds think that Santa's going to come on a reindeer with a sleigh. And let's keep our children innocent. And for the people that want to indoctrinate our children with adult things and not keep them innocent, they're going to realize that they have an army of people fighting for them. And when our elected officials do not hold those companies accountable, then we're going to put somebody else in those seats of our elected officials. Because our goal and our biggest goal is to keep children safe. And that's the bottom line.
100%. I think it's important to address the multifaceted approach to this because on the one hand, there's this oxymoron with needing better laws, but also the existing laws are not being enforced by the existing public officials. So more laws won't exactly help reduce the bad things from happening. So like the justice system needs a lot of work. But then there's also the responsibility of the tech platforms and the developers and the companies that spend millions of dollars on these very elaborate algorithms that are designed to delight and entertain us and keep us on those platforms, but that have also been found to be quite aggressive when it comes to targeting children and specifically showing them content that's inappropriate to them. So I believe the tech companies have a huge responsibility. And like you said, in many cases, they are not only failing to protect children, they are intentionally profiting off the abuse of children. And again, I'm talking about social media apps and all the different apps, none of which were pornographic or even dating apps that I used while pretending to be a child in these counter-trafficking operations. These apps that everybody considers safe, that any child can download from the App Store, all those developers, those companies, those people need to be held accountable. So it's beyond just the sites that are specifically for adult content and broadening that to the internet. But now here's the third level, because as good as all that technology can be, if parents aren't willing to be involved with their children and to be honest about their addictions, because here, this is where it gets a little sticky. I'm not saying that it's always, the parent's fault when a child happens on inappropriate content. I'm saying that if you, as an adult, which is totally fine and legal, but if you as an adult are consuming that type of content, that will be known to your network, meaning your funnel, your algorithm in your internet, your server, that will be a native online experience, and it's inevitable that somehow your children will also share in that experience. That's just inevitable. Now there's also things like children, especially young teenagers, knowing how to create workarounds for boundaries. So for example, I have a really good friend, again, Mark Strassy's a technologist, like one of the most premier technologists in America, who created all these safeguards in his house, including a VPN and all these different things. And his teenager, he wrote a book about this, so it's allowed to be talked about, but his teenager created a VPN workaround to get around his very intricate process. So that's something that, exactly, if, we can't rely on our elected officials anyway, but even if we could, that's not something they can stop our children from or come inside our houses and be involved. Right. And we don't want government more involved in us or our children, correct? So that's something, in addition to, the tech platforms, they can only do so much in terms of the fence at the top of the cliff, but it's actually mostly on the parents to not only limit or help avoid internet access until their child is of an appropriate age to consume digital information. Now, I know there's things like schooling online, but what I'm saying is that if you're a parent and you give a child unlimited, unsupervised access to the internet, you are giving them a loaded weapon. That is not something that's appropriate for children, even though your child may be as angelic as you think, and even though you may be as well intentioned as you are, that device is not trustworthy. I had this conversation with my nephew, who's 9 years old, asking for a phone. And it was the whole dialogue, and all my friends have one, but why not? But I'm only going to watch YouTube videos that are educational. I said, here's the thing. It's not that I don't trust you. It's that I don't trust that technology. I don't trust the device, the developers, the algorithm. So in an age-appropriate way, the kids need to be aware of those risks, but parents also have to enforce and ensure those boundaries. Otherwise, we can't expect the government to do it.
What you should ask the parents is, would you leave your child with a known predator? Even though you trust your child, would you leave them with a predator?
Absolutely not.
And every parent would say no. Exactly. No. I think because the internet and technology is so evolving, way beyond the average person and even really smart persons. Even that guy, that great technology specialist, his daughter figured out a workaround. Is that there are always loopholes and it is always evolving. And so how do you work with that with kids? And that comes a great responsibility. That comes a great responsibility on the parents' end, and it comes a great responsibility on the government's end. And it really needs to become a great responsibility on all these technological companies and social media platforms and apps end, is that we all need to be responsible and truly understand that parents just think we're just going to stick our kids in front of these computers. And hey, listen, there's single moms out there. There's people working three jobs. This is how kids watch movies. The culture has shifted. Normally, people get more of their news, even adults, on their phones than on traditional media. Traditional news is dying. And so we've all been indoctrinated to get our information from these technical devices. And so we're all consuming this specific information and changing ideologies because of it. But we've got to figure out real systems to put into place so that when these things happen to kids or when something does evolve, we understand how to disrupt that. And for parents to understand these apps or like these laws that are being fought, like right now, COSA, you know, um, which is a Child Online Safety Act, uh, the Report Act, you know, certain things have just gotten marked up for children and safety. Earn It Act, again, Earn It Act for like digital responsibility. All of these laws are so important. And I think that if people knew about them on a much larger level, they could really advocate for them, which would help protect kids. And I say this because, look, let's just say, you know, we had this, you know, let's just say we couldn't rely on government at all, right? Let's just say that they weren't going to do anything. Our government is being more proactive than they've ever been for this stuff, thank God. But let's just say that we couldn't. Us as the consumers, us as parents, us that pay for the cell phone bills and the computers and so forth, we have the power to change the demand of how we are consuming what we're watching. And we have to understand that we have to be disciplined in that power ourselves. And to also say to these companies, if you do not safeguard and ensure that our children are going to be safe, as much as we love this app, we're going to erase it from our phones. As much as we love this platform, we are no longer going to use it. And I can promise you, because these people, businesses just care about money. That's the bottom line. If they knew that, they would put in safeguards and implement measures themselves. And so I think that what's really interesting and what's happening now is not just that our elected officials are saying enough is enough, but our society has really understood that a large part of social media can be very unhealthy, especially for children. And all these children that have committed suicide or have been victims of sextortion or CSAM, that we would never want that for our children. And if we would have known, we would have already put these systems in place. But now that we do know, we're holding everyone accountable. And I think that that's going to be the driving force, is that even though things are going to evolve, if these tech companies know that they are always going to be held accountable, and if they don't do the right thing, they're going to be canceled, they're going to make sure that safety will be put in place. Does that make sense?
It does. No, I agree with that. I am full transparency.
Are we out of time? Okay.
No, we're good. I am devising a plan where, like I said, this is a solutions-oriented approach, and it's basically in the brainstorming stage, which is why I welcome this conversation. But I do want to see tech platforms held accountable, and that's across the board. That means whoever is guilty, whoever has harmful content for children of children on their platform, I want to see accountability. And I'm ready to dig in there and talk to the people and have them explain it to my face or walk me through it and see who the real guilty people are, or platforms, or whatever it is, because I'm not biased. If whichever the platform is, if it's harming children, if it has harmful content on there, if it's allowing predators on there, I think the public needs to be aware. And I think the public needs to get loud, make enough noise to hold them accountable. I think there's also a lot of maybe misconception about who really is part of the problem and who's part of the solution. And I say that as, someone who's investigating this to really find out who's really behind it, because there's a lot of political theatrics, of course, and there's a lot of misguided solutions. So I don't want to misdirect anybody's focus or have people basically wasting their time chasing something that either isn't a real problem or blowing it out of proportion when we could actually be tackling the real problem. I know that will involve unity in terms of the right people coming together and setting any narratives aside in order to really work towards solutions. And I think it also takes an innovative approach where things aren't working the way they're supposed to. So that means we may need to do things differently. So again, while I wish that our elected officials could be trustworthy and not too cowardly or corrupt to not only implement but also enforce legislation and policies that do protect children, that do hold these platforms accountable, I've seen so many bills and things, papers signed and pictures taken, and then nothing really happens. So I'm kind of, beyond the pretending stage of when it comes to elected officials, but I'm much more into the get into the weeds of who's really behind this and who's willing to talk about it. So for example, one of the things that I'm really wanting to verify is, and this is weird, not weird, this is, a thing to investigate for sure, because it's not my field, but is there child harm currently, or in the last, let's say in the last year or 2 years, is there child harm on these platforms? Because if so, that requires a very different response from we the people versus, I'm not saying it's okay that it happened 5 years ago. I'm just saying if things have truly been taken care of, then people should also be aware of that, so that again we can be calling out the appropriate things that are either currently a problem or have room to go until we can actually handle them appropriately. But like I said, I'm not biased in terms of which platforms, because I've seen them on all kinds, including the ones that too many kids are using, like Roblox and TikTok and all these like totally normal platforms that people don't necessarily think twice about children using. But then these adult platforms are getting a lot of heat, and I'm not saying that shouldn't be there. I'm just saying I want to get into the root cause of the problem. There's going to be, let's just call it corruption. There's going to be people being paid off. There's going to be big money. Like there's going to be corruption behind it.
Sure.
But there's also going to be a lot more layers of this conversation. So I look forward to working towards those solutions. And I just wanted to see if you had any input on the broad picture of how do we actually sanitize the internet from child harm.
So, I mean, and I love the way you think, because at the end of the day, that's all we want is solutions. And we got to figure out a way to do it. I never got this. People just try the same thing 100 times. Like if it's not working, let's try to figure something else out. Here's what I like to break things down as. When you talk about corruption, just in the case with Diddy alone, it's going to expose if he did have a trafficking ring, if he was trafficking people. It's going to really expose all the people that helped facilitate that, because a lot of people would have facilitated it and would have known about it. And so I've trademarked this saying, and it's called corruption clusters. And I like to explain it like this, because corruption clusters are groups of individuals that many times work in different sectors but work together to help facilitate trafficking. So what that would mean is like big tech companies working with specific elected officials to make sure that laws are blocked so that they can still continue profiting from that. And so it's like, well, how would you figure that out? I mean, so many things are trackable now. Who are these big tech companies? And a lot of times they have these technology coalitions, and they're under like these like harmony names about like, decency and love coalition, and just all different things. But when you get to the bottom line, it's these massive tech companies that generate billions of dollars, and their interest is to protect those dollars. And they put money into the elected officials' campaigns to stay in those seats. And so what I think we also need to teach people is to recognize like what these clusters are of corruption and these power alliances. Also, a lot of times elected officials, they do want to do something, but companies and corporations have become more powerful than the people that we've put in power. And Epstein proved that. Epstein was more powerful than the law enforcement that was arresting him. And so, and that's a different conversation to really break
and
down the difference.
Right. And apparently more powerful than the presidential administration at the time, because nothing was done and nothing's still been done under this administration.
Right.
So yeah, there's been a lot of examples of the government covering up corruption. So that's why I tend to not go towards the let's get the government to implement more laws, because I understand where that's coming from, and it's a noble, it's a logical solution. But this is not a logical problem. The entire thing, I'm talking about child trafficking and exploitation as a whole, the corruption that supports it and funds it. We can't expect the same people that are supporting, funding, and protecting this industry to be the people to somehow make things better and less corrupt, So it's a difficult balance there.
It is difficult because what it is and what the general public and people need to know is it's profit and participation.
Yes.
It's when people are in power, are profiting or participating, and or both, they're profiting and participating in the facilitation of child sex trafficking.
Right. And either way, they're guilty.
Correct.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And so how do you change that? And one way is exactly what you're saying, to find these solutions. But the other thing is, I've seen this happen with big tech companies. I saw it happen with Fosta Sesta. And I know that's a controversial bill, but that took on really Google, who's now, and Microsoft and Yahoo, who's now, a lot of those companies are changing their ways and ensuring safety. But basically, the people have to speak.
Yes.
And they have to be united, and they have to be very disciplined in that action. Just like what I said, if there was a social media platform, called Simple Sassy, I'm just making something up, and it was like the greatest social media platform and everybody loved it, but it was really helping to facilitate CSAM and commercial sexual exploitation. And elected officials didn't want to get involved, or you couldn't get laws changed because of corruption. If all the people just came together and said, we're going to delete this app, like, we have the power to cancel things. The issue with our society is that we have become a very transactional society. And we have to get back to the roots of humanity, which is that our kids are more important than anything, more than a popular app, more important than anything. And we have to let these corporations and these politicians, both parties, know that we are done with the corruption the way it's been. We're done with children being trafficked. Like, that is over. Epstein was tied to 5 presidential campaigns, like 5 presidential cabinets, 5. He trafficked hundreds of thousands of children in all different ways, in and out of this country, internationally and domestically. A lot of people knew about Jeffrey Epstein, and a lot of people profited and participated from that. And so we have to, what happened with Epstein was there finally was such a pushback, but it took 30 years.
Yeah.
Imagine all those victims. Everyone says, if you see something, say something. And I have really big problems with that statement, because a lot of times when people do see something and they say something, they get retaliated against, and then we don't have a system put in place to protect them. And so it always goes back to the same thing. The powers in the people, if we can really start valuing humanity and each other over power, corruption, and greed.
Absolutely.
And so
1,000%.
Part of I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, 1,000%. I was just backing up everything you said. It's up to we, the people, to not only put our differences aside and come together on what matters, which is protecting kids. Objectively, it is protecting kids. That's what matters. Not our differences, not the things we can disagree on, but how can we, if needed, compromise to find solutions? I think it's also imperative that we see past the political theatrics, because if we assume that, for example, it's a misconception that, more laws will create less crime. It's a misconception that a lot of these politicians that have nice talking points are actually doing something about it. Recently, last week or 2 weeks ago, I went to a nonprofit organization's event in South Florida. It was their launch of their South Florida program where they were combating human trafficking. and their governor DeSantis had promised to be there and be a part of it and be supportive of it. And the day of the event, this is Governor DeSantis, who is very outspoken about, exploitive content in books and things like that, and who has made a good effort. The day of the event, he contacted the event coordinator and said, guess what? Not even an excuse like I'm sick. He said, this is too much of a hot button topic. I won't be attending. I am calling out the fact that Governor DeSantis called human trafficking too much of a hot button topic for him to attend and support. Now, that's one of so many examples. I'm not calling out only one public official. I'll call them all out. But my point is that the theatrics when it comes to what they talk about, but then what they're ready to actually show up and do or support are obviously usually quite inconsistent. So yeah, I'm a little sarcastic about, on the one hand, yay that you're talking about it. On the other hand, we need you to actually take action if you're in a position of power. And if you refuse to, we, the people, not only need to be aware, but need to hold them accountable, because we should not accept that.
Yes. I think, I'm not an elected official, so I don't know the stress and the pressures that they're under. I'm sure it's a lot. Parties cancel people all the time just for talking about something different. That one subject. It's become so hard for elected officials to actually advocate for what they care about, because they'll get canceled themselves. But I think we're living in a time where you have to be brave, and whether it's a hot button topic or not, it's child sex trafficking,
Correct.
and it doesn't matter, and so I think somehow we're going to have to find a way, though, for elected officials that are trying to make a difference and fight against these things to not get canceled, because I've seen good elected officials on both sides speak
For
up
sure.
about specific things with children, and they're not voted in the next time, and their parties don't support them. And
Correct.
so they understand that. So there is this fear, and it's trying to understand like where everybody is coming from. For me, the elected officials that kind of make my skin crawl are the ones that are like, hey, we just went to church with my wife and my kids. I love God. This is so important. Let me use this topic to elevate my political career, to move up and up and up, or fundraise for my campaign. And then behind closed doors, they're profiting or participating, and are both, from both. But
Absolutely.
I think our nation's just getting to a point where we're starting to really see through it, and we're starting to want to hold our elected officials accountable. If you say something, do what you say. That's just not even just for elected officials. That's for pastors and priests, and bishops. Like, if you're preaching on a pulpit, we expect for you to live that life and not have a pretend life. To people in power that have influence, we expect them to live the life that they're saying that they're living, because that's why we're voting them in. That's why we listen to them, because of what their moral compass is. And I think that we are in a different season this 2024, where a lot of things are going to be exposed. And I'm hoping and praying that people are going to realize you may not be able to get along on other topics, but when it comes to children, and when it comes to the child sex trafficking slave trade, that if you're not on board to protect kids, you're going to become obsolete. From local
Absolutely.
government to statewide government to nationwide government, because the only people that would want you in then are pedophiles, predators, or traffickers that are commodifying humans. And we don't want any of those kind of people in. And so,
Absolutely.
that's basically what I'm hoping for. I know that you and we have to talk offline about, I want to really hear about your solutions, because you really have some incredible solutions on like how your brain works, so that we can help figure out how we are going to be innovative to protect children even more.
Yeah, I look forward to that. I definitely don't have all the solutions. I'm on a quest to find them, but I think I also have a way to not only think outside the box because I never had a box, but also because I am pretty fearless about approaching people and asking them for, what's their proposed solution. And also, I don't really have an inherent bias, whether it's politics or religion or anything else, in terms of who needs to be part of the solution and who needs to, be the bad guy. I have a let's protect children mentality, and whoever's going to help me do that, I'm going to work with them, right? So
Yeah.
I appreciate that. And I
Amen.
definitely look forward to, we the people, because everything you're saying in terms of supporting the elected officials who are, that's we the people, not canceling the elected officials who do show up and say they will and pledge to do the right thing. That's we the people supporting them. Canceling the ones who talk but don't show or won't even talk about it, that's also we the people. So it's a multifaceted approach, but it does in general come down to we the people standing together with not only unity, but a strategy that's effective and actually practical in terms of the current dynamic, whether or not we like it, it is what it is. So how can we improve that? So I look forward to talking to you offline and with some of the people you work with, because I am making moves to reach out to some of these people, and not only for public accountability and, investigative purposes, but also because I'm all about solutions. And that's all it comes down to me. How can we protect children? How can I make sure that my nephews and niece will not grow up in a world where they are being hunted on the internet like I was in the 2.5 days that I was pretending to be a child? Realize, once
Wow.
again, I want people to realize these were not dark web apps. These were not the bad apps that, people aren't supposed to use. These were regular apps that any child can download from the App Store. I want people to realize a few things. In the 2.5 days that I was pretending to be a child on the internet, I did not send one message request, friend request, comment, live stream, nothing. I did nothing to even let them know I was there. I was inundated within seconds. And I filmed this on my other device because it was so alarming, like just how quickly they came, how many people came, and all that kind of stuff. In the 2.5 days that I was pretending to be a child on the internet, I saw more pictures and videos of adult male genitalia than I have in my entire adult life.
Wow.
I was sent adult pornography. A predator sent this to who he thought was a child, who he was obviously trying to do bad things to. He was, grooming is too nice of a word in terms of the explicit content that person was set out to achieve. I was sent adult pornography, and I was sent child pornography. In the 2.5 days that I was pretending to be a child on the internet, I had to hand my device to Homeland Security 3 times. I need parents to understand, first of all, where this passion is coming from. I'm a survivor of child trafficking. I should not have to be the one, by the way, as bait out there on the front lines, facing this kind of predation that in that way. Like, this should not have to be me. This should be our elected officials. But I digress. I need parents to understand how bad it is, how intense the predation is, and how influential that content is on a child's brain. I'm an adult and I can handle it, but I still had to take time to essentially detox, physically, mentally, spiritually, emotionally from that type of predation I was inundated with. And I'm an adult. Your child cannot handle that. Your child cannot unsee that. And it will change the dynamics of your child's brain and interaction and social skills. So we're doing a lot here to hopefully change what our future generations will have to experience on the internet. And that comes down to accountability and solutions. That comes down to all of us being willing to work together for solutions. There may have to be some compromise. It may not be perfect. We may have to navigate. We may have to smile and wave through some elected officials who we just have to get things done with. I'm willing to do it. My whole goal here is protecting children, and I will smile and wave all the way there. So, Jacquelyn, I really enjoyed this conversation. I look forward to continuing it with you, but I want to give you the floor for any final words or message before we sign off here.
I just want to ask you a question before I go. Did you make a video of your experience that you can share through social media so that parents and people can see. I think that would be really powerful because I think us saying it, some people will get it, but to actually see it happening and how it happened in real time, um, I think that's something that would really jar people into action.
Yes, I did that. Now I blurred out all the pornographic content I was sent and words and things that would get me banned from social media if I were to post it. Dark humor, because like that's what they're sending a child, you know. But I did
Right.
post it about a year ago, right after this event happened, and I did some live streams about it. I can repost some of that because look, I am a social media expert. I own an online marketing agency. I thought I knew how bad it was going to be. I'm a child trafficking advocate, you know, like I thought that I knew what to expect. It was
Sure.
so much worse. It was so much more intense. Like I mean, I was disgusted. You know, I'm sitting there probably 16-hour days, fingers on fire, chatting with like 300 predators at a time. 2 other adults pretending to be children. We're sitting in the room just like
Wow.
trying to get these guys, and just seeing, you know, one of the hardest things was the amount of predators that we couldn't arrest and actually get, even though the case was solid. We just, they were
Right.
in a different state, or we couldn't get to them for whatever reason. They were way too good at it. They had these nebulous profiles. Like,
And how
y'all just need
scary
to
is
know.
that? And how scary is that is to know, wow, this person is a predator, whether it's a pedophile or a trafficker or both. Um, and that, you know, they're not going to get arrested. And so they're going to wait for
Yes, and they're
the
still
next
out
kid.
there.
And I just think that, like, I would love for you to show a video on that and that we can help share that and create a social media campaign, because I think that that's what, not just parents, like other advocates need to see, other
Yeah,
organizations need to see, that law enforcement needs to see, that elected officials need to see, that schools need to see, so that when they see it and they see how pervasive and sinister and quick it is, um, they'll want to do more, and they'll want to do more about it quickly.
yeah,
I think that's important. So I'm
absolutely.
gonna figure out with you offline how we can do a social media campaign for that, because I actually think that that's going to be one of the most powerful things.
Yeah, I
And thank
absolutely
you
agree.
for doing that. I just want
Mm,
to thank you, because I can only imagine, even though you are an adult, but you know, being a survivor leader and an advocate, and you know, just overcoming everything, and you have this incredible heart. Uh, how traumatizing that was, but to put yourself out there on the front lines to, you know, do this, I just want to thank you so much. And
mm.
you know, we need more people like that. So I'm excited to work with you and really figure out how we can get this social media campaign going. I think that's going to
Definitely.
make a difference. Okay.
Definitely. I'm excited for that. And thank you. It was very disturbing, but I know I had to see that because it pissed me off to the extent of that's a whole new level. Like, you know, my primary mission is combating child trafficking. Online exploitation is a related topic, not necessarily specific to trafficking, but almost every child has an electronic device. And on every electronic device, they are being targeted. So yeah, this is a whole mission. But again, I appreciate everything you do. Thank you for this dialogue. And I definitely look forward to working with you and many others for solutions. So thank you,
Yeah.
everyone, for watching. And thank you for sharing this information. Thank you for having a solutions oriented approach, because we are here to protect children and we will make that happen.
Have a good night. Thank you so much.